Good evening, everyone. My name is Antonis Kotsonas, and I'm the president of the New York Society of the Archaeological Institute of America. I'm also an associate professor of Mediterranean history and archaeology at the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World, New York University. Today, we have a very distinguished speaker whom I'll be presenting shortly. But before this, let me say a few words on the important work that AIA is conducting in this country and beyond. So the AIA is the North America's largest and oldest archaeological organization with 200,000 members worldwide. There are communities across North America, but also beyond. The Institute supports archaeologists and educators, the excavation of archaeological remains and associated publication, research, and site preservation. The Institute publishes two journals. First is Archaeology magazine, which is addressed to the general public and has a wide readership of over 700,000 per issue. This is an amazing resource for getting to know what's happening in archaeology worldwide. And of course, there is the other major publication that the Institute is producing, the American Journal of Archaeology, the world's leading journal of Mediterranean archaeology and a fabulous source of excellent research. The AIA offers all sorts of opportunities. Tonight is one of these opportunities. We are hosting a lecture by a distinguished speaker. We are also planning a set of events. We have another lecture next month, but also further events planned for next year. The AIA has a platform where people can find opportunities for conducting fieldwork or opportunities to visit spectacular sites around the world in group tour, organized and led by professional archaeologists. So by joining the AIA, to which I warmly invite you to consider, you become part of this amazing legacy. You help uncover the past and experience the thrill of discovery. And there are all sorts of benefits that come with membership, including access to the publications. The AIA, as you know, is a non-profit, and we rely on the generosity of donors. So please consider making a gift that will support archaeological research, site preservation, publication, and different kinds of programs. You can see the details on your screen. In addition to these general programs and initiatives, the AIA is developing, our local society has developed a very important scheme for supporting students who are interested in archaeology. And we are very proud to offer on an annual basis a number of scholarships which cover the membership fees and offer different opportunities to our scholars who are undergraduate students and beginning graduate students. This program has been going on for 4 years now, and I'm very happy to say that tonight the full cohort of our scholars for this year is joining the lecture, and I would like you to hear these names and remember Wanda Harris, Leopoldo Zampicoli, and Christos Theodorou. These young scholars will be the established scholars of tomorrow, and we are happy to support their career development. On this note, I close with my introduction of the AIA. I invite our speaker to share her own PowerPoint, and I'll start introducing her.
Can you see that? Oh, wait a minute. There, can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Very good, great.
So it is an honor and a pleasure to introduce you tonight, Professor Holly Pittman, who is a very top expert on the archaeology of the Near East, with a fabulous experience in research, teaching, curatorial work that spans several decades in different countries. Her CV is over 20 pages long. So I'll be offering here a very brief summary of the highlights, but I hope that this will show you, it will give you a token of her major contribution, and of course the lecture will give more of this. So Professor Pittman was educated at the State University of New York, and then she did her graduate studies at Columbia University. Her PhD was on glaze, steatite, glyptic style, the structure and function of an image system. She has had a very prolific career, mostly associated with the University of Pennsylvania, where she rose to be the Bok Family Professor in the Humanities. She also held positions at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, and they really have a fabulous collection of antiquities, especially from the Near East. She has done curatorial work at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, as at the Department of Ancient Near Eastern Art, but she has also held different positions of administrative positions. She has been the director for the Center of Ancient Studies. She has been the Cora director for a program of archaeology of Ukraine from 2003 to the present, and that's very relevant to what she will be talking about tonight. She has been director of the Lagash archaeological project from 2018 onwards. She was just mentioning to us that this is a dream site for her, and we'll get to understand why in a bit. Her research record is fabulous. Over 10 books of monographs, edited volumes, and so on and so forth, an endless series of articles on all kinds of topics in the archaeology and history of the ancient Near East. And she has excavated in Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Cyprus, and different projects, different sites, different periods. This is a fabulous and very unique record. And I think all this experience will become evident tonight as he engages the site of Lagash and the work she has been doing there. The work is very important for a number of reasons. And actually, last month, it attracted the attention of international media with her latest discoveries. And I understand we'll get a glimpse into this later tonight. So without further ado, I want to extend a very warm welcome to Professor Holly Pittman. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me loud and clear? Great. Okay, so thank you, Antonius, for that really wonderful introduction and for the invitation to speak to the members of the New York Society of the Archaeological Institute of America. I am sorry, we were just talking earlier that Paul Zimmerman, who I know is active in this chapter, is not on the call with us, too many hours ahead. He has been, is now, and will continue to be such an important part of our project, able to solve any problem, fix any gasket, operate any machine, and at the same time tell great stories. So he, together with the rest of the team, is why the Lagash Archaeological Project is succeeding. I'm not sure what background this audience has in southern Mesopotamia during the early Bronze Age. Most important for tonight is for you to know that Lagash, modern Tel al-Hiba, is an important part of that story. My intention here is to share with you some of our results and explain to you our research goals. But before I do that, I think it might be useful to have a few basic orienting slides. Southern Iraq is and was in the 3rd millennium BCE an incredibly flat alluvial plain with extensive marshes at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, where human communities first came together in large, dense communities that we can confidently call cities. This map shows you that during the time that we're concerned about, the mouth of the Gulf was not where it is down here at the modern city of Basra, but rather this is a hypothetical reconstruction of the marshes and the Gulf, the marine waters coming all the way up to the side of our site and surrounding sites. These cities were places having high enough human density to allow for the development of social and political complexity, and for economic specialization that makes cities of all eras engines of change. In Sumerian literature and other textual evidence from Mesopotamia, we are told that cities were the only civilized mode of settlement, that every major city was the property, indeed the residence of one or more gods. For example, Nana, the moon god, lived at Ur, down here. Enki lived at Eridu, the water god. Enlil presided over all of the gods at Nippur, right here in the middle of the alluvium. And Ningirsu, the warrior god, was resident in the city-state of Lagash, Girsu, Lagash, and Negan. In the minds of the Sumerians, it was the responsibility of all humans, from the most powerful to the most lowly, to take care for and feed the gods. In exchange, the gods would provide for the city. This is the message on the monumental vase from Uruk-Warka, which I saw when I was in Baghdad in 2018 at the start of this project. Another basic principle that we learned from the Sumerian texts is that cities are not permanent and they do not hold power forever. Rather, power rotates among cities of the alluvium at the whim or the plan of the gods. Both principles hold true particularly during what we call the early dynastic period, when the city of Lagash, at the center of the city-state of Lagash, flourished. The First Dynasty of the city-state of Lagash was founded by a man whose name is Ur-Nanshe. And his successor, these later relatives, through 7 kings, controlled vast and rich lands for more than 150 years before they were brought to an end by a more powerful king, Luzal-Zaghazi, who originated at the site of Umma, upstream from the Lagash city-state. With the founding of the dynasty, we think that Ur-Nanshe also consolidated the sites of Girsu, which you can see here, Lagash, and Negan, the smaller site of Negan you see located on this waterway, into the political, economic state of city-state of Lagash. And it is that entity that Lugal-Zaghazi destroyed, opening the south up to unification under the Akkadian king Sargon. During this early dynastic period, around 30 political independent cities or city groups, many marked on this map, flourished in the lush environment of the alluvium of southern Mesopotamia, with fertile lands replenished through the deposited silt from the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, and marshes overflowing with food and building material. Over the third millennium, in these urban centers, institution of dynastic kingship exerted sovereign power, emerging from civic and religious institutions. The technology of writing underpinned an elaborate bureaucracy, nascent rules of law, and long-distance trade, both overland and by water, bringing preciosities necessary to assert status and express power. Ur has provided the royal cemetery with its incredible riches, including the spectacular image of Puabi, which I hope you all took advantage of in her display at the Morgan Library, and the wonderful Enheduanna, She Who Wrote exhibition. It is there that we have clear evidence for dynastic kingship. Tello, ancient Girsu, which gives us the first visual and verbal narrative of the great battle between Lagash and Umma, is this the stele of the vultures, for control over land and water. And the plaques of Urnanche, who founded the First Dynasty of Lagash. Urnanche is probably responsible for incorporating Girsu Lagash into the city-state of Negan, into the city-state of Lagash, and he probably constructed this incredible structure that has been cleared and made comprehensible by the British Museum team at Tello, this bridge as a major urban waterwork, and as probably a port on the going to Negan Canal. The city-state of Lagash was certainly one of the most important, if not the most powerful city-state in southern Mesopotamia for the long-lived dynasty. Sometime in the 24th century BCE, the successful cities along the Euphrates and Tigris were rapidly growing. They began to bump into each other, and they were competing intensely over fertile land and precious water. So we're in an era in the late early dynastic period of internecine warfare. Cities that were upstream, of course, had the advantage. By the reign of Lugal-Landa, and certainly by Urukagina, the city of Umma and its allied city Zabalam, who had struggled over the fertile fields controlled by Ningirsu, brought the city-state of Lagash to an end. So here we see on the map in brown the territory that is reconstructed as being controlled by the city-state of Lagash, threaded together by this so-called going to Negan Canal. This is the mouth of the Gulf. And the blue is the city-state of Umma, with Umma and Zabalam. And so by the end of the First Dynasty of Lagash, Lugal-Zaghazi was able to grasp hold of this, of the control of water, and bring all three cities to an end. Girsu came back again after about 100 years, but there was never any full occupation of Lagash itself or Negan after that traumatic event. So with that background, let's now turn our investigation to the site of Lagash, modern Tel al-Hiba, where in 2019, I initiated a new campaign to investigate the site. Lagash is an enormous site measuring at around 450 hectares at its most conservative. It has always been associated with marshes, which ebb and flow and rise and fall, depending on upstream water and rains. These historical images, an hexagon image from October 1972 on the left, and a historical Google image from December 1988 on the right, show that the marshes are constantly ebbing and flowing around the site. And also the scarring from, so you can see here, coming down here and then twisting down through here and here, all kinds of scarring on the site that show the effect of millennia of wind, and especially the erosion of water on the site. This marshy condition certainly existed in the third millennium. We know from cuneiform texts that especially to the north, the marshes were extensive. But by the beginning of the early dynastic period, we are confident that the city was a coherent entity, not made up of individual islands within marshes. This is a point that we'll return to at the end. Let me introduce you to our team, which has evolved over the years to what I now call the Dream Team. With me here is Dr. Zaid Al-Rawi, who is a landscape archaeologist and the project manager, and without whom this project would not exist, but with whom it functions very smoothly. He is now in a position at the Penn Museum, and we're very glad to have him anchored there. To the right are two key senior members of the project. I think you recognize this guy, Paul Zimmerman, who joined the project in 2021 for the second LAP season, and who is, as I mentioned earlier, our remote sensing and survey specialist, but also so much more. Next to him is soon to be Dr. Reed Goodman, who is in charge of the geoarchaeological work that is providing really revolutionary results. I am so pleased that he will be at ISAW in the fall, and he'll start teaching and sharing his results with the community there. In the middle is our remarkably talented field director, Dr. Sarah Pizzamente, associate professor at the University of Pisa. And she is, hands down, the best digger that any of us have ever worked with. And we have worked with a lot of diggers. She makes it look so easy. We live in a wonderful house about 6 minutes from the site. So this is our house. This is the site itself, and you can see the site is just this very slight rise above the caravan of camels, which are on their way to Kuwait. So we have, this is where we spend, 24/7 for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, depending on how much money we can raise, digging, recording, photographing, washing, sorting, counting, all of the kinds of materials that we retrieve from the excavations. Behind the house is a tent for the antiquities police, who are with us all the time. You really can't see it here, but it's back behind here. And here is the guard house of people who are at the gate. After a very brief visit in the late 19th century by Robert Koldewey, a German archaeologist, the first serious investigation was undertaken by the joint expedition of the Metropolitan Museum and the Institute of Fine Arts, NYU, under the leadership of Donald P. Hansen and Vaughn Crawford. They had 5 seasons between 1968 and 1978. Donald led those seasons exploring monumental architecture preserved on this western ridge, which is a slight elevation beyond the higher than the rest of the mound. In the south, he uncovered here in Area A the Ibgal temple to the goddess Inanna. Up here in Area B, he uncovered the Bagara temple that was sacred to the god Ningirsu. In between, he studied a complex, really a rabbit warren of rooms that turned out to have royal inscriptions on tablets and on seal impressions. And it seems there that we have clear evidence for craft production of precious metals, as well as perhaps leather. We have what looks like a scribal school, and this is work that was the topic of Zeynep Bahrani's dissertation. And we've now undertaken a complete new study based on the original archive of Donald, and are coming out with a volume that has much more material to bear than was originally presented. All of these contexts can be confidently dated to the ED3 period of the First Dynasty of Lagash, because all of them produced royal inscriptions of various kings, as well as pottery that we know is early dynastic 3 and other small finds typical of the period. Donald returned in 1990 for what turned out to be the last season, where he exposed the western quarter of what is probably another temple complex, but that does not date to the ED3 period, but rather it dates to the ED1 period. I had just joined the faculty at Penn in 1989, and so I was lucky enough to be able to go with him on that last season, and we worked together in Area G. He and I fantasized about starting a whole new series of campaigns, but Saddam Hussein had different ideas. He invaded Kuwait, and that put paid to our dreams. So with those results in mind, Donald's results, we designed a research agenda that seeks to complement and fill out the result of Donald's project, which focused squarely on installations of the elite. In the early seasons that we've been having, we are concentrating our efforts in an area called Area H, which is down here. If I go back here for a minute, this is where we're working now. And over the next 3 or 4 seasons, we will identify and articulate similarities and differences between neighborhoods, looking at a variety of contexts that include craft production industries, public spaces, domestic spaces, streets, and water installations. In general, what we want to know is how the other half lived. Was it homogeneous across the city? Is there specialization from neighborhood to neighborhood? Are some neighborhoods wealthier or poorer? Lots and lots of questions, and nobody has really asked those questions in a systematic way for the foundation of the first cities in the world in the early dynastic period. In order to address these questions, we're employing a variety. So I think I need to stay here for a minute, right? A variety of methods, which during the long hiatus between the NYU Met efforts and ours have developed to such an extent that attacking such a large site is not a complete fantasy. Remote sensing is the method that is having the greatest impact and potential, because, as its name suggests, it does not require excavation, which is always very time-consuming and expensive. But remote sensing without ground truthing is a folly that can create misunderstandings that must be challenged. Emily Hammer served during our first season in 2019 as the remote sensing specialist. Paul replaced her, taking over as the remote sensing and survey Shanas in October 2021, joining us for our second season. He used UAV drone photography, and he made a much needed topographic map of the site. You can see it here, replacing the one that Hansen did in 1968. During the next 2 seasons, the spring and fall of 2022, Paul designed, supervised, and executed a systematic survey of the entire site, which has provided us with heat maps showing the major concentrations of pottery, ceramic, and metal slag, as well as stone and lithic debitage. These heat maps will guide us through much more focused surface survey, especially when we begin to focus our work on the northern part of the site. So we're going to stay down here for at least 2 seasons, the fall coming up and the fall of 2024. Continue looking at least 2 distinct neighborhoods in this part of the site. I'll show you a map in a minute. And then in 2025, we plan to go up here and look at this hotspot of worked stone. So in the 2 previous seasons, we will do a lot of prep work in order for us to be really ready to prepare to attack the northern part of the mound when we go. The 2 most powerful remote sensing methods that we're employing is the US UAV drone photography together with thermal photography and magnetometry, and Paul is the master of both. Here you see him with our project drone, and below here is a drone photograph of a building that has massive walls that you can see from the air with accumulation of salt in the middle. And this is very close to Area G, where Hansen excavated that temple oval. And so we will certainly poke around in there to see what there is. We're not going to excavate there, but we certainly want to find out what's there, what's its period, and what potential does it have. So next to this drone photography is a magnetogram of the same location, where you can see even more clearly. So here are these very thick walls and the empty space in between. And then there are these other walls features here. And then these are pits that are coming from levels that have eroded away. Above, you see Paul walking the square up and down Boustrophodon without even a Walkman. He can have no metal on him, anything magnetic at all. He goes 45 times up and down for a 45-meter square. This system that we have is a German Sensis fluxate magnetometer system. And we were able to afford 3 sensors for the fall 2022 season. We've secured enough funding to be able to expand it to its full capacity of 5 sensors, which will mean that there'll be a bit less walking for Paul, but maybe a bit more pushing. The red patches that you see over here is magnetometry that has already been accomplished on the site. The red patches in H are we've done and Emily Hammer did. All of these are ones that were done in 2019 with a borrowed Bartington with 2 sensors. Over the next 3 seasons, we will systematically image as much of the mound as we can, helping us to decide where to sample to discover watercourses, monumental architecture, domestic craft production areas. With the magnetograms, we will be able to be very, very selective about where we actually locate for horizontal exposure and where we will sample to ground truth for both date and nature of deposit. I want to just show you these photographs that Emily Hammer took in 2019 season, which at the end of it, we had extraordinary amount of rain. And these are taken right after the rain finished. And so when you've got the right moisture combination, you can see how incredible the density of the architecture is on the site. this is the area that she flew over, that is that monumental structure with this open courtyard, which is very close to Area G and certainly must have some religious function. All right, so here are magnetograms of Area H, and you can sort of see what potential this technique has to offer. So this middle section is had to be corrected in order for it to work together with the magnetometry that we were accomplishing in the fall of 2022. But we now have both collections speaking to each other. And so you can see how vivid the image is. You can see, so this is a detail of that. So you can see down here, we've got a very large 10-meter wide city wall with bastions and a gate. This is a major street that's running up that then bifurcates here and here. We're planning to go, so our neighborhood where we're working now is up here. These are our red squares where we're excavating now. So we'll stay up there in the fall and begin to identify those places that we're going to look at close to the wall across the street to see if these two neighborhoods in Area H are similar or different. In our first season in 2019, the field director was Augusta McMahon, who at that time was at Cambridge University. As I'm sure you all know, she has since moved to the University of Chicago, where she is taking on the project at Nippur. It will be wonderful to have two American projects in southern Iraq. Our goal that first season was simply to get oriented both to the site and to the project and to working in Iraq. We opened up two trenches, one in Area G, trying to answer a question left hanging by Donald's excavations, and the other, this trench one, in the highest point of Area H. We selected the spot by walking the area and locating the highest level of elevation that had very dense fired debris from pyrotechnic activity. Augusta uncovered six kilns in that square, which had been decommissioned at one time or another. And we are working on their sequence now, trying to understand how they were built, how long they were in use, how they were decommissioned, when were they decommissioned. The pottery associated with them is clearly ED3, probably in the early part rather than later part of that sequence. During that season, Sara Pizzamente served as our ceramicist, having previously worked at the same in the same periods at the site of Negan, 12 kilometers to the south. She began with the ceramic typology worked out from the legacy excavations and published here in this volume by Dr. Steve Renette, who has now gone on to be at the University of Washington, and we're have our fingers crossed for another position. And she is now adding new types and refining the sequence with new phasing from the current excavations. When she took over as and now as the sole field director, Sara continues to supervise the processing of the pottery. It's an enormous task. Here she is standing on the pile of the discarded pottery that she and her team processed in the spring of 2022. And the amount of pottery that we processed in the fall of 2022 was almost twice as much. The pile is ridiculous. So we processed more than 50,000 sherds, drew more than 9,000 of them. And so a new piece of equipment that we're bringing out with us next season is a laser profiler, which we hope will preserve the sanity of even the most stalwart and dedicated of the team. One of our long-term goals of the project is to produce a highly refined and carefully stratified ceramic chronology from the earliest levels in ED1, that will be to the end of the early dynastic period. As you may have sensed, our ceramic chronology of southern Mesopotamia is very coarse, essentially divided into ED1 and ED3, more than 700 years, with an ED2 floating around in the Diyala, but never to be found in the south. The reason it's so coarse is because the change in the pottery is gradual, with very rare disappearance and appearance of new types, which can serve as diagnostic chronological markers. So we're taking extensive radiocarbon samples, associating them with primary deposits in each of the discrete phases. And this will allow us to use statistics as well as diagnostics to track the passage of ceramic time. In 2019, we found that the kilns in Trench 1 were decommissioned not with debris from the same period, but rather trash containing early dynastic 1 solid-footed goblets, as well as seal impressions that we can anchor confidently in the ED1 period through their comparison with material from the seal impression strata at Ur. So that set us wondering, what on earth would these craftspeople, where on earth would these craftspeople have gotten this trash? Was there ED1 context available on the surface and close by to the ancient potters from which they could retrieve this trash for putting out the kilns? The second season, I'll answer that question in a minute. The second season, we did not excavate. It was in the middle of COVID in October of 2021, but rather we sent out a remote sensing team, Paul, you heard about, and geoarchaeological teams that continued the documentation of the site to drill for the geological cores for environmental reconstruction. As I said, this is the subject of the dissertation of Reed Goodman, who is going to be defending this come hell or high water by May, and who has really made a very significant findings that are helping us to understand the environmental conditions of the entirety of the alluvium, both in the east and in the west. That's a story that I'm going to leave for him to tell. It's his story, and he tells it best. It was during 2022 that we really gained momentum on the project. We have 2 full seasons, one in March, one in March to mid-April, and one in October through the end of November. And it was then that we moved into our new house, established wonderful working relationships with the village, and went to work down the hill from Trench 1 in Area H. So here's Trench 1. In the spring, we opened 2 trenches, this one here, Trench 3 and Trench 2, expecting to find kilns because the similar burnt debris was on the surface. We did find kilns, as you can see here in Trench 2, but in addition, we found a situation that allowed us to understand the profound challenges that the erosion on the surface present to us in our planning and our interpretation of Lagash. In Trench 2, which was excavated by Brad Hafford, this, let's see, I may have, yeah. So the eastern side of the trench, we have these kilns. This is a schematic drawing, and from these kilns, he traced 3 sort of working surfaces before they petered out into nothing. In the western part of the trench, just slightly lower, the tops of walls, you can actually begin to see them here in this photogrammetry photograph, began to appear. And what was in those, in the debris that was found in these rooms, as Brad cleared them, was clear evidence of ED1 material from seal impressions that compare with Ur to figurines and early pottery. So right there, we could understand that in places where there had been burning, the taphonomy of the site was such that those ED3 levels were preserved because water and wind could not blow them away. But where there were not kilns, over here, for example, the erosion of what would have been the ED3 levels covering this were removed, and we come right down onto ED1 contexts. Okay, so now we go to this fun context that we began to reveal in the spring, and then in the fall we really understood its importance. So this is trench 3, and then in 2022 fall we made this extension to trench 3, and this is recorded basically through thermal photography, not through excavation. So this is an aerial view of that site. And what we have here is a completely ED1 context, except for tiny little bits right up here, where we have the remains of what we have called the tavern. So let me go through this find in a little bit of detail, and we can talk about it more in the question and answer if you want to. So in the first exposure here, we had these rooms, which are sort of regular rooms, an alley here, and then here was a lot of trash. And some, for example, this seal impression, which is definitely early dynastic 1 in date, came out of that trash, but we had no idea what we were going to find on the other side. So we thought we were maybe in some kind of domestic setting, when unclear whether it was inside or outside. Here's the thermal imaging that allows us to kind of finish out that building. And then in the fall, we opened up this 10 by 10. And after Sarah cleared the very top debris, which there was a completely eroded ED3 kiln up here, she came down on this complex. And this complex was certainly belonging to ED1 because of the pottery that we were finding. But there were these features in it that we really weren't quite sure what they were. So, you know, one feature is this round thing that has another vessel inside. Other features are these benches along what now turns out to be an outside space. And then thirdly, along this wall, dozens, if not hundreds, of conical bowls full of food, so full of fish and their skin, had tumbled to the ground. So think McDonald's, right, with all of the hamburgers on the shelves behind the counter. All this food is ready to go. And so when this was about the 5th of November, enough time for us to be able to really work for another 2 weeks to clear it completely. So when Sarah understood what the complex wall, she called me on the phone. I was working in the house, doing the books, registering the objects, whatever it was I was doing. And she yelled at me, "We have found a tavern," in her best Italian accent. So instead of asking her to explain, I just dropped what I was doing, got the driver, got the police, drove out to the site, and she explained to me what she had. And, you know, the minute that the explanation came, it was obvious. So those of you who know Sarah, I think Antonio's, you probably know her. She got her initial training, archaeological training, in Rome, in public spaces, when she was a student. And in Rome, she had cleared more than one tavern. And so these were places where the Roman workers could come for lunch or for a snack or something like that during the workday. All the pieces were there. It's just that our context was early dynastic 1, so 5,000 years ago, not just a skimpy 2,000 years ago. So I'll be more than happy to talk about the tavern, but remember, we were doing this in November, and so we're still waiting for results of floral, faunal, radiocarbon, and all of the rest. But let me talk for a minute about this structure. This is a top-down view. This is a side view. So it's a little more, it's about 1.5 meters in complete diameter. It's made out of pieces of pithoi, about 5 layers deep all around. And we haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet, but it's going to be probably buried a meter deep. And then in the middle, so there's, it's clean dirt in here. And then in the middle of it is an upside down pot with its bottom broken out. And there are many versions of this cooling device, is what it is, that are used even today with mobile communities. It's a way to keep things 10 degrees, 15 degrees cooler than what you've got outside. And the way that it works is that you have water that you continually pour, and then it evaporates around this core and then inside the middle here. And then you put whatever it is you want to keep cool, so cheese or beer, or probably not beer, but cheese, right? In there, and it stays cool. So there is on our website, on the news page, a wonderful animation that an Italian woman who we're trying to track down, who has a YouTube series called Sarah in the Midst of Time. And this is Sarah with an H, not with just an A. So it's not our Sarah. And so she shows exactly how this cooling device actually works, and she gets it absolutely right on. So take a look at that. It's fun. So here is an up close of the collapsed shelves that have this food in place. So we have the conical bowls, which are, like bevel rim bowls. There are millions of them, and then solid-footed goblets that would have been for the beer. And then seal and put. We got another version of this same seal in. So if we look here, right, this is the trash, right? And so we got that one sealing here, and we got other impressions of it here. So it's all one complex. Okay. All right, so 2 more contexts that I want to show you. This is trench 4 and trench 6, just up the road. So this is trench 2. This is trench 3, where the tavern is. So this we excavated in the spring of 2022, and because the magnetometry was off, we didn't have it to help us locate this street. So the excavation was pretty unsatisfactory. But in 2022, when we figured out how to fix the magnetometry, we can see this street running right smack dab through both of these trenches, which is what we had wanted. And so this trench was excavated by Reed Goodman and Sarah Quaggio, who's a student of Sarah Pizzamente. And so we have this nice, wide, beautiful street, rooms on one side, rooms on the other. And these are in a little alleyway here. We think, it's a hunch, that these 2 rooms have residue of what is probably part of the very finishing stages before the pots went into the kilns. So this is, of course, a pit from up above, but then on the floor of this room and on the floor of this room, 2 different kinds of clay were discovered in a kind of thick lens. The northernmost one was a yellow clay with lots and lots of temper. And this was a reddish clay that was very, very clean. And so one of the things that we will do when we go in the fall is to try to figure out whether it's possible to stratigraphically link this area so that we could have connectivity to the kilns that Brad has in his trench and that Christina has in this little trench to the north. So that's that would then give us a whole kind of neighborhood area that we could then take lots of micro samples from and be able to see who's eating what and what kind of pottery and what are the other crafts and any preciosities and all of that. Okay. Right. Okay, so I did that. And then the last trench that we opened up is up here, and this is trench 5. And this is a curiosity. It seems that it's maybe domestic, and we want really good domestic context, right? So we're looking for clear domestic. We're not quite sure, but there's this mud brick mass that is platform-like and unclear. But down here, we've got found in the last 2 days a toilet with steps going up to the squatter part. And so we will auger that, and we'll be looking for pathogens as well as, is it really a toilet? But I think for sure it is. And then in here, we have more fish bowls with bowls with fish in them. And we found in both this context and smushed into the floors of this room dozens of jar stoppers. And you can only imagine how frustrated I was, because none of them are impressed with seals, right? Which is what I do. So what we're working with here is sealing technology, and we've got a lot of it in all of these contexts, sealing technology that is being used to preserve and protect foods. But we're not at a place of either, marking them for commodity or marking them for transshipment or anything like that. So we will find seal impressions, but lots and lots and lots of jars of these stoppers that go into the tops of jars. Okay, so now I'm getting to another, so that's a summary of the whirlwind summary of our excavated context. So I want to end with some very brief comments about our understanding of the organization of the site during the early dynastic period. As I mentioned earlier, the processes of erosion by water and wind over the 4 millennia since the city was destroyed by Lugal-Zaghazi has been very extensive. In a nutshell, what this means is that remote sensing used by itself, either drone photography or magnetometry or both, will be very misleading. So last fall, when we were in the field, an article appeared in the Journal of Anthropological Archaeology by Emily Hammer, who used the remote sensing data that she collected in 2019, and which she was absolutely allowed to study and to publish, to offer a comprehensive interpretation of the site of Lagash during its heyday in the 3rd quarter of the 3rd millennium BC. And this is a kind of summary slide of her conclusions of the organization of Lagash at its height in the early dynastic period. While she did extensive work that is most valuable, we have written a response to her paper, which will appear within the next 4 weeks in JAA, that explains in considerable detail why her reconstruction is incorrect. We did this not simply to challenge her, but rather to set the record straight about what we know now about the site and its structure over the third millennium, and what we cannot know without more ground truthing. So here I'm just going to offer one, point out one serious error that she makes. So she interprets these scour lines, which maybe you can see in this hexagon image, and then she colors in blue here, as a ancient canal, a water feature that sort of snakes down through diagonally through the site. She identifies this as the Going to Negan Canal. So rather than winding through the city on this diagonal path, it is much more likely, and we think we've established, that the Going to Negan Canal almost certainly runs straight through this upper part of the site. You'll remember that Google photograph where when it floods, that's where the water goes. So this is something that we will investigate more deeply in the next season. But we did, after we read the paper, say that, okay, let's test this. Let's see if there's really an ancient water canal here. And we put these 4 test pits running right through here, running right through this scour, and you can see it right here. And so test pit 1, test pit 2, test pit 3, test pit 4. So in addition to putting those test pit downs, before we actually opened the trenches, we got Paul to do magnetometry of that area. And so although we couldn't see any hints of architecture on the site, on the top, because this water erosion had removed all of those possible traces, well, you can see very, very clearly the existence of major monumental walls in this area that are, part of this test arc that we undertook. And so, and you can see more walls, more monumental walls there. And so this is test pit 3. There are 4 of them, and they all we dug down to about 1.5 meters in a 2x3 meter test. And in each one of them, we hit mud brick that was, that filled the entire bottom of the trench. And so we're in monumental architecture. So we got ground truthing for the existence of these kinds of features in these tests. And in one of them, this very well preserved, having lost only a tip, cone of Eonatum, giving a description of his building of the Ibgal to Inanna in area A, was found embedded in this mud brick. And so that, gave us really good, solid early dynastic date. And so David Mulder has prepared this slide that shows the clean cone. And here, over here is the Ibgal. This is one of the foundation figurines of the Ibgal. And then this is another document that is from the same period. So all of these inscribed documents tied this together. Okay, and so these are views of all these 4 test pits, and each one of them shared a topsoil of maybe 20 centimeters, and then they had this lens of water-laid deposit that was completely clean and gravelly, and clearly was put down not over a sequence, but seems to have been put down in one event. So we feel that we're looking here at one event. And so we have taken shell and carbon-14 samples. They are being run. But what we think we might be seeing in these pits, right? If we, here, is the destruction of the city of Lugal-Zaghazi, who tells us that he came down, the man from Umma came down, he committed a sin against Ningirsu. Offense there was none, Urukagina, king of Girsu. But as for Lugal-Zaghazi, governor of Umma, may his goddess Nisaba make him carry his sin upon his neck. And in the lament about the fall of Lagash, we are, by Urukagina, we are told that Lugal-Zaghazi floods the city, burns the city, and redirects the canals. And so this is really, the end of the First Dynasty of Lagash at the site of Lagash. And it's the end of the city-state of Lagash until Gudea really comes back in the Second Dynasty of Lagash and resettles, not at Lagash, but upstream at Girsu. Okay, so that's it. Thank you very, very much. These are our donors. We're hoping to expand this even more. The blocks here tell you what we're planning to do. We'll be here in the fall, expanding our work in the fall of 23, and then in the fall of 24 and 25, we'll be both here and up here, depending on whether we get the money that we're asking for. Okay, so I have no idea what time it is. Happy to take questions if people feel that there is time.
Thank you very much, Holly. That was an excellent discussion, fascinating discoveries at the site. I understand why the press was attracted to the tavern, but you gave us much more, and we are deeply appreciated. On a side note, it was very nice for us regulars of the local society to see what our colleague Paul Zimmerman is up to when we miss him and his technical wisdom.
Yes,
when he's in Iraq with you.
Right. Well, he's just so handy at so many things. And he really is in his element. And so it's just great.
Yes, thank you. So as is customary, I invite people to address questions. You can use the chat function and all speak up if you prefer. Maybe I can get the conversation started by asking you about the areas you will be targeting in the next few years. So starting from your last point, what are you hoping to get? You gave some very interesting hints on this with the different areas of activity and how you want to, you said how you want to explore possible difference in specialization and so on and so forth.
Right. So let me try to get up the magnetogram.
Yes.
Of here. Yeah. So we will definitely, when we go back in the fall, we'll definitely, so, we're up here now, right? And we really feel that we have to finish understanding what's going on in this neighborhood, right? So this neighborhood is clearly an industrial area. And so one question is, it's an industrial area in the early dynastic 3 period. What is it in the early dynastic 1 period? One of the things that we want to find out is what is the long story of Lagash? Because Donald did 2 deep soundings, one in 2 different places, and he got 9 meters of early dynastic 1 before hitting water table. 9 meters, 8 meters, right? So, and that's ED1. ED1 is a long period. We're at the top of it now. And we really want to, I mean, ED1 is really not well understood. And so we can, at least at this one site, I think, because it's on the surface, have a real shot at it. And so this relationship between the industrial areas of ED3 and what, you know, the tavern is not industrial, but we will certainly take those kilns out. And are there kilns of the ED1 period beneath? Is it an industrial area beneath, or is it some other kind of function? And then then dirty industries get located in that part of this neighborhood. So, you know, that's one thing that we'll definitely be going after. And then, as I said, you know, people always say that lots of different kinds of crafts go on next to the city walls, right? And so, and maybe even outside the city walls. And so this is certainly, it's not necessarily a city wall, it's a neighborhood wall, probably. We definitely will track it, figure out what it is enclosing if it hasn't been eroded away. And we'll begin to look down here and see whether this neighborhood is, you know, is poorer, is richer, is bigger houses, smaller houses. We plan to use Gini index comparison in order to you know, standardize our analysis of comparison. And so we want to get comparable context so that we can, you know, compare them statistically. And then, as I say, we'll go up north to where we can see this kind of dense architecture, you know, which is just right, you know, I mean, just right on the surface. And, you know, one of the problems with Emily Hammer's reconstruction is that all of this architecture that she sees on the surface, she just assumes is ED3. But as we have discovered, the only thing that we've got that's ED3 is kilns, and everything else is ED1. And so that's not to say that there wasn't ED3 above, but the nature of the ED3 is completely unknown, right? And so it's you know, the lesson is that you can't use remote sensing without being able to ground truth.
Thank you. Thank you. That was fascinating. So I have a set of questions, and I'll try to keep the sequence. First, the message. Holly, this is James Smith. As you might guess, I'm interested in the streets. What can you tell us about them from current research?
So, like I say, right, we just came back in November. Everybody's teaching, trying to just stay on top of it. And so there's not a lot that we can tell you about the streets, but we have taken microstratigraphic samplings from, we've excavated them by phase. So we have the multiple layers of the streets. They're full of small broken pieces of pottery. There aren't, we really have very few finds, right? I mean, we've got some figurines, we've got lots and lots and lots of lithics. We've got lots and lots and lots and lots of pottery. But we don't have, you know, people, at least in this part of the street, didn't have holes in their pockets. And so they aren't, you know, dropping their seals or, you know, dropping their earrings or that kind of thing. But we will look very carefully at the streets and try to figure out if they're being used for trash removal. You know, there's a whole sort of sequence of questions that we'll be asking.
Thank you. And thanks, many thanks from James as well. Elizabeth Clancy has a question. Have any textile tools been discovered on the site?
Yes, I mean, we certainly have some spindle whorls, no question. You know, one confounding question is, you know, are they spindle whorls? Are they chariot wheels? But we certainly have real spindle whorls. And I can't tell you what the contexts are, but we certainly have them all very well recorded. We don't have a lot of bone tools. We've got some bone tools, but not a lot. And so it really is the spindle whorls. But you know, in the Ur-3 period and in the Gudea period, you know, there was a huge textile factory that Peter Steinkeller has reconstructed down on the port, right on the mouth of the Gulf at Gershana, so just south of Negan. So we don't know where Gershana is, but textile production was probably a big industry. And we just, I mean, what I feel is that we know that Girsu was the religious heart of the city-state, and probably the political heart of the city-states. That's where we find all the big monuments and all the tablets and the queen's estates and everything. My hunch is that Lagash was a very big, important population center that was dedicated to food production. So people lived in the city and then went out to the Guaiden to do the farming and craft production. And there, you know, there are, you know, big important buildings there too. But I think it's going to, I think that, you know, if there were several lifetimes, as I hope that there will be for this project, we're going to find a lot of different crafts.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I'll come down and visit in the summer and I'll show you everything.
Fabulous. Thanks.
Yeah.
So here is an opportunity for our audience. I invite Andrew McGee to please ask a question.
Hi there. Yes, you mentioned ED3 is having more intercity conflict because of more competition for resources. And connected with that and your goal to do more pottery typography, I'm curious if you're looking at ED1, if there's less interstate conflict, does that also mean there's like less interstate trade, and thus any pottery typography could be much more regionalized? Is that like something you have to put under consideration?
Yeah, I think absolutely that would be something that we would look at. We've you know, we have good sequences at Ur, but remember that, you know, Ur is on the Euphrates, so it's a whole different system. But we can, you know, we've got very good working relations with the team at Girsu, and Sarah has already initiated a joint ceramic project between Girsu and Lagash, where we'll do all sorts of chaîne opératoire. So one of the things that this NSF that we've applied for is to look at the ceramic production from the point of view of the kilns, the working surfaces, and how they you know, existed through time. We're going for another grant to look at the chaîne opératoire of the ceramics. And with that, we'll have analyses that will help us to show you know, whether we're dealing with imported corpuses or not. I mean, remember, you know, it would be impossible sort of to tell, you know, the clay matrix of Zurgul or Girsu from Lagash, since we're all working with the same, you know, alluvial clay within 45 kilometers of each other. But we really, that's an important question that we will want to ask. Remember that in the ED1 period, we have the city seals. And so while there, you know, might have been less bulk trade, we certainly know from the city seals, or we think we know from the city seals, that there are these amphictyone of site chains that are perhaps gathering votive offerings to give to Inanna at Uruk, right? I mean, that's one reconstruction of the city seals. Yeah, but comparing across neighborhoods, but also comparing through time is something that we're right on.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you from me as well. I also want, as we are wrapping up today's event, I want to communicate the warm wishes and congratulations that come from different members of the audience and can be seen in the chat, from our former president, Jeff Lamia, from our board member, Celia Berghoven, from people who have already spoken, my ISO colleague, Lorenzo D'Alfonso.
Yeah, Lorenzo, hi.
Paula Lazarus and other people.
Hi, Ollie, that was awesome, and
Awesome,
I really hope you can get through the chaîne opératoire and give us a little bit more depth on this troncoconical mass-produced balls that goes on for a millennium and so on.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's really Sara Pizzamente and Sara Quaggio. So we have a whole day workshop at ICANE. And so Sara Quaggio is working out a preliminary presentation of how we're going to approach this. I mean, as you know, early dynastic ceramic sequence is, you know, it's impossible. And so we have a chance here to, you know, look at chronology, but also look at production, look at inter-neighborhood trade, right? So specialization, this idea of Guillermo Algaze, that these cities get started because, you know, specialization in reed making and mat making in certain kind of ceramic making and date paste and all of this stuff, just even within a city like Lagash, you know, it's like neighborhoods in Italy. You know, you have your specialty shops and that's how things grow.
Yeah, but the fact that you are reconstructing neighborhoods of early third millennium is awesome. So we have learned a lot about conflict, about many other aspects of political and social complexity there. But to get these aspects is really great. So thank you very much again.
It's great, and Lagash is the perfect place to do it. There it is, you know, it's right there. And this magic tool, you know, it's wonderful.
And Lorenzo and I are looking forward to working with your team member, Reed Goodman.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to his being with all of you.
And I'm sure his work will be of interest to our society as well.
We have to do a whole thing on what he's doing.
So on this note, I want to thank you once more profusely for
Well,
this,
thank you everybody for coming.
sharing this fascinating research. It has been great to host such a distinguished speaker tonight. And I represent all of us in thanking you so warmly. Thanks.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me. Come down to Penn and see us all.
Good night, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night.